بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of all worlds, the creator of everything that has been created, and the one that sends messengers and prophet to warn people and guide them to the right path. Our salutation and greeting to the most noble Prophet of Islam and his pure progenies. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين. Race with one another towards the forgiveness from your Lord and towards paradise, the width of which spans heaven and the earth. It has been prepared for those who are God conscious. Ali Imran 133. Before I start, I would like to congratulate everyone. What we have heard for the last night's program has been nothing but positive comments during the day. And I think this, more than anything, is part of the collaboration of everyone and working together. Inshallah, being the night of power, the 23rd night of the month of Ramadan, Allah would accept all your struggles and your effort, inshallah. At the same time, tonight is the 24th. Literally, we have possibly 6 and most likely 5 nights left of the month. Whatever we have done or we haven't done during the last 4 or 5 nights, it's critical that we really must do something about ourselves, because the month of Ramadan, as Khutbah Sha'baniyah indicated by the Holy Prophet, that it's a month of transformation. We change during this month. We leave negative traits and we gain positive ones, inshallah. Concept of Mahad and hereafter is not something that all humans might concur and agree with, that there is a world that at the end of our life will be resurrected and we will be asked accountable for what we have done. Even those who may not agree with this concept, that there is a life after death or there is a hereafter after this world, cannot deny the fact that a day will come where we have to depart. That goes without saying. They may not agree with the formulation of a unique life in the hereafter, but the fact that our life is limited in this guest house that we call the world, and ultimately we have to depart and leave everything behind, is undeniable. Issue of Ma'ad becomes a critical issue for those who believe in monotheistic faith. Monotheism formulates life in a unique style. Part of it in this material life, which is transient, and another part is a permanent one in the hereafter. Various languages are used, metaphors and similes in the Holy Quran, to bring to the attention of the faithful and the reader of the Quran to understand that this life is not a permanent life. And ultimately, we have to depart. And what happens is described in detail. That there is a day of resurrection. We all have to stand up, be accountable for our deed, and ultimately, based on how we have spent this few days, few nights, few years, decades, and so on, our deed will decide the direction that we are going to go. If we have submitted to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and followed the guidance, then one way, and if not, it's another. There are consequences. Quran uses the metaphor of Jannah and Nar, heaven and hell, to distinguish between these two paths that we will take at the end on the day of judgment. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةِ فَقَدْ فَازَ. It defines a paradigm for success for our life. If on the day of judgment we have formulated and structured our life in a unique manner, that we have protected ourselves or saved ourselves from punishment and anguish, then we have succeeded. Otherwise, we have failed. And this Jannah and Nar is something that we repeatedly come on in the Holy Quran on a number of verses. I just picked two. They have whatever they want and they wish for and desire in description of Jannah. The fire of hell will burn them from within and then proceeds outwards. Its first spark will strike the heart. Al-Humazah 6-7. Verse 6 and verse 7. And there are a number. I don't think that there is a verse in the Holy Quran or a chapter in the Holy Quran that the issue of Jannah and Nar, anguish and reward, punishment and bliss is not mentioned one way or the other. What we have to do is to understand how do we go ahead and proceed. Within Islamic theology, there is no doubt. They all agree on the concept of Mahad. They all agree that there is such a thing, whether it's metaphor or exact, there is such thing as Jannah and Nar. We all agree that we will stand one day and be accountable for our deed. However, theologians between various schools of thoughts in Islam have had different opinions as exactly what is Jannah and what is Nar. Various opinions. There are those who ask the question, is this, when we see verses in the Holy Quran or even a hadith making reference to Jannah and Nar, are they making reference to a physical reality called heaven and a physical reality called hell? Or it is metaphorical language used to bring the concept of reward and anguish to our limited intellect? We may never comprehend the true meaning of heaven or the true meaning of hell. What we have is descriptive language that makes us pause and reflect. Exactly what is this reality? We certainly can talk about blissfulness when it comes to heaven, punishment, or anguish when it comes to hell. Various descriptions are there to define this, but what we fail is to have a clear picture on what is happening on the day of judgment. This we may not have. So there is a debate as to whether it is physical or it is some kind of a metaphorical use of language. Both of these scholars that opt for various one or the other, they cite a number of verses and ahadith to support their own argument. Remember when we were discussing free will and predestination, I mentioned that the scholars have all go back to the verses in the Holy Quran and rely on few of these verses and reject the others, or interpret the others. The same thing is happening here. The second point of reference is assuming that these meant to be physical. Then do they already exist, or they will exist on the day of judgment? Since heaven and hell, however we define them in a physical reality, supposed to be a place in which people, once the trumpet sounds, everybody resurrects or resurrected, they go through the process. Those who are to be blissful are identified, and those who are to be anguishings are clearly defined. Then they will go to their place of abode. Then we really don't need to think that they already exist now. It will exist on the time. Because these people somehow in their mind cannot accept that a place left idle, empty, waiting for people to come whenever the end of time comes, and we don't know when that is going to happen. It certainly could be 10 years, 100 years, or even thousands of years to come until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides the end of time. So until that happens, and this unique system that we call it the earth or the universe or the cosmos disintegrates, and a new reality established, we can't say that heaven exists or doesn't, hell exists or doesn't. Other scholars have rejected it. They say, no, it already exists. We have a number of verses in the Holy Quran that makes reference to the reality of heaven and earth as they are now. Those of you who are familiar with the story of Mi'raj, we discussed it a few weeks ago or a few nights ago, that the story of Mi'raj in the historical context clearly identifies that the Holy Prophet was taken from Mecca to Baytul Muqaddas, Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem to heaven. And during this short but yet expansive stay, in heaven, everything was shown to him, including heavens, various heavens, as well as hells. So there is a reality. It wasn't a metaphorical or kind of an image in the mind of the Holy Prophet. It was a real thing that he was shown. Then, assuming that they are real, and they do already exist, the third question is, where is it? This kind of academic discussion that has taken place regarding where deflects attention for what is our responsibility, how we should behave, so that ultimately whether heaven exists or doesn't, or it will exist in reality, whether it exists on this earth or somewhere else, we will be entitled to the blissful consequence that or reward that we should have based on our action. Urafa and the mystics have completely different interpretation of heaven and hell. They don't believe, or at least their texts don't indicate that they accept this physical reality to be important. And by the way, those of you who are familiar with Munajat Sha'baniyah and some of the du'as that we had during the month of Ramadan, and Du'a Abu Hamza, as well as a few other du'as, clearly make reference for the unique individuals that they are God-centric. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plays a major role, if not the only role in their life. Heaven and hell for them is not the physical reality, is how close they are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how far away from Him. The blissfulness that they get as they get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the anguish that they get when they are departed or they are separated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For them, it's this way. They interpret heaven and hell as what the literal wording is, the closeness to the beloved and the departure from the beloved, or the distance with the beloved. If you are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you feel blissful, tranquility, and The ala bidhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. The stability of the heart comes from constant remembering of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who are far away, this creates the instability in their heart that ultimately creates its own unique consequence of pain, anguish, etc. There is a khutbah in Nahj al-Balagha, khutbah Hammam. If you have time, go and read it. One of the disciples of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi comes one morning to him and says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, describe to me heaven and earth and hell. Imam responds with a short kind of description, but this turbulent soul of Hammam is not convinced. He asks for a more detailed description of heaven and hell. And then Imam begins a long, lengthy sermon. Go to Nahj al-Balagha and check Khutbat Hammam, and you see Amir al-Mu'mineen, the description that gives. As soon as he began to describe the kind of people that you should be or to expect to be taken to that blissful place, and those who will be departed from it, the life of the soul of Hammam began to change, and his features began to change. By the end of the khutbah, Hammam dropped dead. And Imam says, that's what I was afraid of. But sometimes these people ask questions and I have to respond. Why is it that we really are not paying attention? It's a fact in our life. Nobody can deny it. If somebody stands in front of the door, I challenge anyone. If they ask you, do you believe in heaven and hell? Anyone saying no. Do you believe that we are going to be resurrected on the day of judgment? I find it very difficult. Any of the brothers and sisters in here would say no. But yet, our behavior, our life is structured in such a way that does not reflect on the conviction that we should have. Some kind of an academic conviction, a theoretical conviction that does not reflect on our life. Somebody comes to Abu Dharr and said, Ya Abu Dharr, disciple of the Holy Prophet, why is it that we are afraid of death? He said, because of your attachment to this material life, you really have not paid attention to the hereafter. So you build this life, but you destroyed the hereafter. This life is supposed to be the mean. Our own literature clearly uses the metaphor of land that we cultivate. This life is supposed to be cultivated for the hereafter. It's a mean, not a goal in itself. Once our material attachment to this life becomes the goal in itself, we are afraid of letting go. And heaven and hell become no more than a theoretical, abstract concept, as death is. There is not a day that passes by within this Islamic center that we don't have somebody being buried and being brought to the center. And we all stand solemnly behind the coffin. But no concrete change in our life. The fact that tomorrow, the day after, or some few years from now, we could be in that position and other friends could be walking behind us. And these days we see youngsters at the age of 20, 18, 25, 30, 35. This afternoon we commemorated a mother with 2 children. May God bless her soul. Just beginning of 30s. Beginning of the week, another sister within our community around beginning of 20. Youth within our community, 18, 19, 20. But do we pay attention that death could come at any moment, and are we prepared for it? The last few nights of Ramadan is supposed to be spent wisely. Even assuming that we were not able to do anything from beginning of the month up to now, let's not let this opportunity miss and go without at least benefiting something Otherwise, what we will have, what the Holy Prophet said in Khutbah Sha'baniyah, we have benefited nothing in the month of Ramadan more than abstention from food and drink. That spiritual change and reorientation still left there for it to take place. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that as not only tonight, as we go through these few nights that are left, please keep remembering each other, pray for each other during this, whatever is left of the month, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins and shortcomings and guide us to the right path, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's all recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the soul of the sister that we got together this afternoon to commemorate her, and a number of other sisters and brothers that have passed away during the past few days. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.